마을에 행군을 합신다!
I want to share with you the story about Jeju Island in South Korea, and particularly Gangjeon village, which is on the south side of Jeju Island. Jeju Island is just south of the Korean peninsula, and there a Navy base is being built today. When I myself called the South Korean embassy in Washington, I was told, don't call us, call your government, the US government, because they're forcing us to build this base. And I was not the only person that was told that when they called the South Korean embassy. I heard from many other people around the country who told me they heard the same thing. This base is being built in beautiful Gangjeon village, which is 450 years old. Jeju is a good size island. It takes really 1 hour to drive from Jeju City, which is on the north side of the island, to Gangjeon village. The population is just over 500,000 people on the entire island. It's been recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site, having several different environmental jewels on the island. And it's been recognized by the people of South Korea for many years as sort of the equivalent of Hawaii, their beautiful destination place where they go for vacations and weddings and things like that.
Underwater ecology of this the planned naval base area in Gangjeon and the Tiger Island is the really rich habitat for the soft coral, and the scuba divers love this. One of their most favored place to dive is this area.
Among the people that will be affected deeply by the construction of this Navy base are the famous women sea divers who literally hold their breath. They wear wetsuits, and usually they're older women in their 60s and 70s and even into their 80s. They dive into the water to the bottom of the seabed, and they collect abalone and other shellfish.
They made the whole living, and through which their income from the they were able to send their kids to the universities.
The pollution from this Navy base is going to be massive.
Notice our military puts bases everywhere where it's pristine beauty. And I went to the Marshall Islands, unbelievable beauty in the Pacific, coral atolls, and there they've detonated nuclear weapons. They put an army base. We're dropping depleted uranium warheads in the lagoon, toxifying the environment of these gorgeous places. And now I come here to Jeju Island, beautiful, like one-of-a-kind lava flow coast, and here they're destroying the coast to make a naval base, and I think.
How does it make you feel?
Oh, it makes me want to cry. I feel terrible. I feel sad. If it weren't for the people here, I would be despairing. But the people here give me hope. Their struggle is inspiring and challenging. We should all be struggling as these people are struggling.
Gangjeon village itself has about 1,500 people. I've had the great fortune to be able to go there on 3 different occasions, seeing the village and seeing the beautiful rocky coast, what they call Gurumbi, even before the Navy base construction work began. So I saw it in its pristine condition. And it's a marvelous, marvelous, beautiful place. Just offshore are endangered soft coral reefs, again recognized by UNESCO as being environmental treasures. And these soft coral reefs will be destroyed as the seabed is dredged in order to make it possible to bring U.S. warships into this proposed base in the village. The base itself would host U.S. aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and U.S. Navy Aegis destroyers, warships, outfitted with so-called missile defense systems. And so what used to be labeled by the South Korean government as an absolute preservation area, the Gangjeon village, the rocky coast, the waters offshore, that entire official environmental designation has been just literally washed away in this quest to build this Navy base to benefit the U.S. military. Now, why in the world would the United States want all of this to happen? Well, it has to be viewed in a recent announcement made by the Obama administration, where President Obama announced a pivot of U.S. foreign and military policy into the Asia-Pacific region. This pivot will essentially be a doubling of U.S. military operations. In fact, soon after making this announcement of this pivot, Obama went to Australia, where he negotiated a deal to send 2,500 U.S. Marines to Darwin, the city of Darwin on the north coast of Australia. And currently, U.S. is promoting and pushing base expansion in Guam, in the Philippines, in Okinawa, and the U.S. is currently negotiating with Singapore, Vietnam, and other countries to allow U.S. to use their facilities in their countries as bases for and ports for U.S. troops and for U.S. warships. All of this is aimed at China as the United States begins this encirclement of China. So why would the United States want to encircle China? Why does the U.S. want to double its military presence in this region? Well, the answer appears to be that the Pentagon is determined that the U.S. is not going to be able to really compete with China economically. But if the U.S. can control China's importation of vital resources, such as oil and natural gas and minerals that literally fuel their economy, then the U.S. would hold the keys to China's economic engine. Well, of course, this is a dangerous and provocative and very expensive strategy, but it appears to be one that the United States has undertaken, in spite of all the negative consequences that will flow as a result of this strategy. And in the case of the people on Jeju Island, it's really hitting home hard. And they will not only host U.S. warships, but they will also become literally a target in this superpower game between the United States and China. The Navy Aegis destroyers that are actually built in my hometown in Bath, Maine at Bath Iron Works are being outfitted with these missile defense systems that are key elements in U.S. first strike strategy. Because Jeju Island is only 300 miles from the coast of China, it puts this base in a very strategic location. And today the U.S. Space Command is wargaming a first strike attack on China. China has 20 nuclear missiles that are capable of hitting the west coast of the United States. And in this computer war game by the Space Command, they try to take out China's nuclear weapons. But China is able to fire a retaliatory strike. A few of their nuclear weapons are not destroyed in this theoretical attack. And then it is then that the missile defense systems on board these Navy Aegis warships and also ground-based launchers that are being deployed today by the Pentagon in Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, and Okinawa. It is then that the Aegis destroyers and these ground-based interceptors try to take out China's retaliatory strike, giving the U.S. a successful first strike attack. So these missile defense systems, in fact, are indeed key elements in U.S. offensive preparations to try to, again, control and manage China in this coming period. And so for the global network against weapons and nuclear power in space, who has been building support for the people on Jeju Island, and particularly the people in Gangjeon Village, since 2008, this issue is strategic because it clearly recognizes the importance of not only this village as a base for U.S. war operations in the region, but it's also a grave environmental issue and an important human rights issue as well. And so we think that it's important for the international peace community to become involved in this issue, to understand more about it, and to help build solidarity internationally for the people. In fact, on September 6th through 15th this year, there will be an International Week of Solidarity held around the world. Local actions will be organized in all kinds of communities outside of South Korean embassies and consulates and in central town squares in various communities, building public awareness and support about the dangers of building this base on Jeju Island.
China is concerned about the construction of a naval base. So if the naval base were built, the conflict between China and the United States will become worse and worse. South Korea will be sacrificed.
Well, the villagers have appreciated this solidarity that we've been building within our network and beyond for these past couple years. And so they invited the global network to hold our annual meeting in their community last February. And so we went there, bringing people from more than a dozen countries to come and to literally see for themselves what's happening there in this village and to see the remarkable people that have been fighting against this Navy base all this time. Among those that came to the Global Network Conference in Gangjeon Village were people from places like Sweden, where Agneta Norberg is one of the leading activists in Sweden today.
I'm Agneta Norberg from Sweden, an anti-war activist.
And what is the necessary accoutrement of a woman, older woman activist these days?
Well, I think the most important thing is to have a wire cutter in your bag. And then some addresses to parliamentarians, presidents, politicians, and you have to have good shoes to climb the fences.
And to walk on the rocks.
And walk on the rocks. And another thing that is important, very important, is to be well dressed to resist the water cannon.
I see. So you wouldn't recommend high heels for this kind of activism?
Well, it can be good. If the police arrest you, you can put your heels in the ground so they can't drag you so quickly.
I see. Well, that's very good.
They can be good for that.
Yeah. Also there at the conference was a Irish priest who is based in Seoul and has been there for many years. The Catholic Church has been quite active. The Bishop Kang has been...
Bishop Kang has, yeah.
And the priests and nuns have been arrested here lately.
Priests and nuns have been arrested.
It's unusual. When I look at the Catholic Church around the world, I've never seen such activism from the Church. What makes it so different here with the Catholic Church?
It's extraordinary. There is an organisation called Sajidan, Priests for the Realisation of Justice in Korea. They're a very active, progressive movement within the church, and I think they're helping to keep the church honest in terms of justice, peace and integrity of creation issues that are affecting the livelihoods of many people in this land. And I think they're the conscience, and I think they're doing a fantastic job. I think the future is bright, and it's tremendously inspiring for me as a religious, as a priest, also to see the Korean clergy take an active stand and see the Bishop Kang here on the island being such a prophetic voice.
The chair of the Global Network, Dave Webb, who is from Leeds in England, is also the chair of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, the largest peace group in the UK.
What are you watching, Dave?
This is a video of Yang Yong-moo, whose hunger strike has been going on for 18 days now, and he's already undertaken a hunger strike of 70 days last summer, and so he must be fairly weak already. So this is a really moving set of pictures depicting why he's doing that and what his struggle is about, really.
How do you feel about it?
I feel well, I just hope he's okay. I hope he comes through this, because they stopped building the base, basically. I think it seems like that's the only way he will actually come out of this alive. Such a brave man, such courage.
There are also several South Korean activists who have come from the mainland, some of them who have been there for a year or even 2 years, helping to support the villagers in their fight against the Navy base. And they've formed an international team, and their job is to help reach out around the world today to create more solidarity and more support, more understanding, more consciousness about this issue. Among these are people like Sung-hee Che, who is actually on the Global Network Board of Directors. She comes from the Korean mainland, and she was the one that introduced our organization to this issue on Jeju Island. Most people don't know that Samsung, the big electronics corporation, has a construction division, and they're the lead contractor today for this Navy-based construction project. And so they are literally blasting the sacred rocky coast. And so this environmental catastrophe of blowing up these rocks and eventually laying concrete across the top of them to build the wharfs to dock these U.S. military warships is indeed a huge, huge bone of contention with the villagers, as you can imagine. It breaks their heart. They suffer at the thought of their sacred coast being blasted and being covered in cement in order to serve as a base for the U.S. military. So when we went there in February, the first place the villagers took us was to a museum in a nearby town. And this museum is called the April 3rd Museum. Most of us did not really understand the depth of the meaning of this April 3rd Museum to the people of Jeju Island. But when we arrived, we quickly learned that in fact on April 3rd, 1948, a massacre began that lasted over a period of a couple of years that killed more than 30,000 residents on Jeju Island. But to understand this, we have to go back in history to World War II and even before World War II. for many years before World War II, the Japanese fascists occupied Korea. And they had a brutal occupation of Korea. And it was after the defeat of the Japanese at the end of World War II, they were driven out, and the United States military took over Korea. And who did the U.S. military put in charge of this new free Korea? They put the former Koreans who had collaborated with the Japanese imperialists. They put those people in charge of this new government. And of course, they immediately set up an army that this puppet government ran. But the U.S. stayed in control. And this, of course, led to much conflict around the Korean Peninsula. As you can imagine, people objected to the idea that their very worst enemies, even maybe more hated than the Japanese occupiers themselves, had been these collaborators. The fact that they were put in charge of this new free Korea was just too much for people to take. And so they began to organize all over the country. And of course, this is what led eventually to the Korean War, the Civil War. Well, on Jeju Island, people were very independent, as you can imagine they would be, being isolated from the Korean mainland. And they began to rise up as well. And in this museum, this April 3rd museum, we learned the tragic story about how the U.S. military essentially directed this entire operation of suppressing the people on Jeju Island that led to this massacre of more than 30,000 people. The U.S. directed it. They flew the transport planes that moved this new Korean puppet government's troops around. And in fact, at times, U.S. warplanes dropped the bombs that killed people on Jeju Island. Well, this was a tragic, tragic story again, indeed. And in fact, it left such a scar on the hearts of the people that just a few years ago, finally, the South Korean government tried to make amends. And one of the decisions they made was to name Jeju Island the Peace Island as a way to heal these wounds of this massacre that began in 1948. And so here today we have this irony of trying to build a Navy base on this island of peace. Well, after visiting this museum, our conference began inside the auditorium at the museum. And one of the very first people to speak to us that day was Bishop Kang, who's not only the Catholic bishop of Jeju Island, but he's also the lead Catholic bishop of all of South Korea. The Catholic community is very strong in South Korea, and they have a network of more than 4,000 Catholic priests and nuns across the country. Many priests and nuns were at the conference that began there inside of the museum in February, the 20th annual meeting of the Global Network. We were honored to have been invited to hold that meeting there on Jeju Island. And so Bishop Kang welcomed us. In fact, he even provided us with the bus that moved our delegation from Gangjeon Village to this April 3rd museum. And he has done remarkable work in the last couple years supporting the people of Gangjeon Village in their fight. He has repeatedly himself visited people who have been arrested and taken to jail. He has repeatedly gone and brought leading Catholic priests and nuns from all over Korea to the village, where oftentimes many of them have been arrested supporting the villagers themselves. Among those who have been arrested are the mayor of Gangjeon Village, who oversaw a referendum, an election, where the people of the village voted 94% to oppose the Navy base. In fact, the Navy, the South Korean Navy, absolutely rejects that election. ignores it and claims that they have the support of the people of Gangjeon village for this base. Mayor Kang is among those who have been arrested, and he spent several months in jail. Many others have been arrested as well, including Professor Yang Yoon Mo, who last summer embarked on a hunger strike while in jail for more than 75 days, nearly died. And in fact, the person that talked him out of continuing his hunger strike was the Catholic Bishop Kang, who went to him imploring him to live and to continue to fight against the Navy base. Just in recent months, Professor Yang Yoon Mo was again arrested for again trying to obstruct construction vehicles from entering the base destruction site. And again, he resumed his hunger strike, this time going about 50-some days. While Professor Yang was in jail last summer, the former governor of Jeju Island joined the hunger strike for 2 weeks and actually slept on the rocky coast, Gurumbi, in a small little vinyl house that had been erected that Professor Yang had been living in for the past year or so. And so during his time, during his hunger strike of 2 weeks, the former governor brought a lot of visibility and a lot of media coverage to this fight, showing that leading politicians on the island oppose this Navy base. In fact, the assembly, what we would call the State Assembly of Jeju Island, voted calling on the national government and the Navy to stop construction of this Navy base. But again, they were ignored by the Navy and by the right-wing President Lee, who's essentially a puppet of the U.S. government. While we were there, we had the great opportunity to participate in the nightly candlelight vigils that the villagers organize and have been organizing for the past 5 years during this fight against the Navy base. We were invited to share our voices from around the world and also to sing songs. And we learned that the way that the people have kept their spirit up is by nightly singing and dancing at the end of this candlelight vigil. While we were there, we had meetings with village leaders who told us about the terrible sense of despair and depression that many people in the village feel.
So in the night I cannot sleep, and when I work in the farmland, I cannot leave the neighbor-based issue. So I always think about neighbor-based issue, and I feel the deep depression. As
they face this huge corporate juggernaut of Samsung construction and the Navy base and the massive number of police that are being brought to the village from all over the country, usually 500 or more at a time, are rotated in, brought from off the island, people, young people mostly, who are drafted into the national police and don't know much about the issue. They're brought there to literally suppress the people. And so the idea of this candlelight vigil every night, giving people a sense of hope and a sense of joy, and giving them the strength to tomorrow go out and for 12 or 14 hours a day and face again this police repression that they have faced, is a remarkable experience. And we felt absolutely privileged to be allowed to participate in this really soulful experience that these people go through every evening. In many respects, it reminded me of a Native American dance around the fire as the people would prepare to go into battle or to go on a buffalo hunt. While we were in Gangjeon village for our 4-day conference, we were also able to, on several occasions, hold protests at the front gate of the Navy base construction area. We went there held a news conference on one occasion, again hearing the voices from various activists from around the world. And on other occasions we went to other gates and tried to request a meeting with the Navy. We asked for the global network representatives to be allowed to enter the Navy base construction area so that we ourselves could see and assess what damage has been done to the sacred Gurumbi rocky coastline. But of course we were denied, as you can imagine we would be. Once we were denied, we began banging on the fence, literally banging on the fence with our fists on the gate of the construction area, making quite a racket. After we were denied access by the Navy, by the South Korean Navy, to the rocky coast, we determined that we needed to find a way to get onto the coastline ourselves, even if it meant that we would have to do civil disobedience and would possibly even be arrested. And so we looked along the fence line, which is quite a massive area now, surrounding the entire rocky coastline. We looked for a way to enter underneath the fence, and we even at one point tried digging a hole to get under the fence, but we found that that was too difficult. And in fact, razor wire had been placed up against the fence on the other side, and we didn't realize this until we had dug underneath it. So then we decided that the only way really to get there was to get into the kayaks and to be taken out by the villagers by kayak onto the rocky coast. So the villagers began a process of shuttling us one at a time out to the rocky Gurumbi coastline. This took some time to get us all out there. And once we arrived, Father Moon, probably one of the most revered and well-known Catholic priests in all of South Korea, Father Moon led a mass on the coastline for us. And there we were, right up against the razor wire, right up against it, with the police on the other side, protecting the Navy-based destruction area. Father Moon has been working for the past year or more to bring more and more people to Gangjang village, particularly working to bring more and more Catholic priests and nuns there. As I said, Father Moon has repeatedly been arrested and has been jailed on several occasions for his activities, usually just sitting down in the road trying to block construction vehicles. But just a few months ago, he was standing on one of these giant cement things that are called tetrapods. They are being placed into the water to, in a way, extend the coastline further and further out into the ocean. And on this occasion, Father Moon stepped out on top of a tetrapod to protect someone who was being harassed by the military. And when he did that, he was pushed off of the tetrapod and he fell 20 feet to the ground. And when he hit the ground, people thought he was dead. In fact, as it turned out, he had 3 broken vertebrae and his wrist was broken, and he was placed in the hospital. And it was first reported that he would be in the hospital for several months. But after just 3 weeks in the hospital, Father Moon emerged to go back to Gangjang village, to return to the Navy-based destruction gate, where he again crawled under a construction vehicle. And in the photographs, you could actually see the white cast on his wrist as he was lying underneath one of these construction vehicles. Clearly, his 3 broken vertebrae had not healed by this time, and he must have been in great pain, but he was so committed to this fight that he was going to be out there no matter what. So following that Catholic Mass that was held there on Gurumbi Rock, we began to sing songs, and a very joyous occasion it was. And then after that, people began to crawl underneath the razor wire, entering the base construction area. This was not an easy thing to do because the razor wire had to be lifted And what was really remarkable was we found that the police on the other side were actually assisting us in helping to lift the wire, something that they would normally not do. I can promise you that I've been watching videos from the Gangjeon village protest movement for several years now, and normally the police would be putting their feet on people's heads and pushing them back, pushing them away from trying to get under the razor wire. But on this occasion, because of the presence of all these international people there, the police were actually helping to lift the razor wire because they didn't want anyone to be injured. They didn't want there to be any stories in the media of people injured trying to get under the razor wire. In fact, we found over and over again that the police, while we were there in Gangjeon village, were very, very easy with us. They were very cautious about not communicating harshly with us, not being too pushy with us, not getting in our way, not trying to obstruct us from marching down the street. This was a very different story, a very different picture than is usually portrayed when so many international people are not around. And this is one reason why we've worked so hard to put out this call for more international people to come to Jeju Island to help protect the villagers as they resist this Navy base construction project. So altogether, 16 of us that day were arrested and taken to jail.
You have the right to remain your silence. You have the right to your lawyer. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your cooperation and thank you for your listening.
Eventually they split the group in half, and some of us were driven an hour north to Jeju City. And I was in the group that was put into a police van with a large squad of about a dozen members of the Korean police that had arrested us. And so during this van ride, the squad leader surprisingly told us that he was currently reading a book about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German who had fought against Nazi fascism. And then he went on to tell us that his entire squad really agreed with us, but that they were just doing their job. They were brought over from the mainland. And we realized that in fact that the message of the people in opposition to this base was in fact reaching the hearts of many of the policemen. And so again, I think the need for this nonviolent protest to continue, because it is indeed reaching many, many people as they bring police there and rotate them in and out by the thousands during this period of time. Once we arrived at the Jeju City jail, we were processed. It took several hours, but eventually we were released late that evening and taken back to the village. The day following our arrest, it was determined by the mayor and the other village leaders that we should all go to Jeju City again to make that 1-hour trip there and hold a news conference, and also try to deliver a letter from the global network leadership to the island governor. And so we did. We went there and we held a very successful news conference. It was attended by a large group of Jeju Island media. And then following that, we tried to deliver the letter to the government building where the island governor is located. But they in fact wouldn't let us in. And so for some period of time, in this very interesting Korean style of negotiation, of pushing and shoving and yelling back and forth, this finally opened the door and we were able to go upstairs to the island governor's office and make the delivery of the letter from the global network demanding an end to this Navy base construction. When we arrived back in the village, we heard there was a big ruckus down at the port where the fishing boats are kept and the kayaks are kept that the people use to continually try to get out to Gurumbi Rock. As we arrived, we saw a huge number of police had surrounded the kayaks, and were not letting the people get into the kayaks as they tried to go back out to get onto Gurumbi Rock. And so for the 14 hours that day, the people were in constant battle trying to pull their kayaks away from the police, who would obstruct their ability to get them back into the water. It was a remarkable experience to see this process and to see the sheer determination on the part of the people. Every now and then they would break one kayak loose from this crowd of police, get it into the water, but then they were soon met by Coast Guard boats that would block them from being able to go out even further. And eventually, people became so frustrated that two people literally jumped into the water, and this water was cold at this time. They jumped into the water and began swimming, and literally swam all the way out to Gurumbi Rock, which was a pretty good distance. And they were able to actually get onto the rock. But by the time they got there, they were freezing as their bodies were so wet and cold. But this is, again, the kind of determination that we witnessed while we were there in this community. It was with great sadness that we all had to leave there at the end of our 4-day Global Network conference. But when I returned home, I was really determined that I needed to raise money to get more people to go there. And so I sent an email out to our mailing list asking for people to donate so that we could get people to go. And the response within 2 or 3 days was so tremendous that we raised enough money to send more than 6 people. So immediately we sent off 3 people on their way to Jeju Island representing Veterans for Peace. And what happened when they got there was all 3 were told, "You're not welcome in Korea," and were forced onto planes to return back to the United States. This broke the hearts, as you can imagine, of the people of Gangjeon Village. In fact, a week later, a Japanese peace delegation was rejected from coming to Jeju Island. Clearly, the government of South Korea was seeing that the growing internationalization of this protest movement was becoming a problem for them, and they wanted to do everything they could to put a stop to it. But we soon found another member of Veterans for Peace, a man from Bellingham, Washington, who was willing to go, and we found another way for him to get into the country, and he was able to go to Gangjeon Village for 3 weeks. And so even today, we're constantly trying to identify more people that are willing to go to Jeju Island to support the people there in this effort to stop this Navy base.
The state has been pressing the villagers and peace activists like that for like 5 years, but I think we will, definitely win this struggle in the end.
Why do you feel that way?
Because we'll never give up.
노동자들의 힘찬 투쟁의 함성으로 막아내고 7월에